So I will start with the evolution of Adobe Forms. So this would be some theoretical concept, but it is also important to understand, like if we are learning some new technology or new things, we should know like what was the past and what is the future. I mean, we all know like in present time we want to learn that, but why we want to learn and what is the scope of that technology in future. So I would like to talk about a bit about that. So okay, so when you check that the Adobe Form things, like when it is introduced in SAP, so it is introduced with the name IFbA. So its full form is this SAP Interactive Forms by Adobe. So it was introduced in 2004 with SAP NetWeaver 640. Then at that moment, SAP already had some their inbuilt PDF technologies like SmartForm and SAP Script, but in parallel, SAP always wanted to have a full-fledged PDF technology, and that's why they had a contact with Adobe and they introduced these things. And since Adobe Forms are the one of the PDF ways where we can use the interactive features as well, so SAP gave that to name as an interactive forms by Adobe. But whenever we talk about this IFbA, it doesn't mean like it is always an interactive only. So the PDF which is being used in the industries, which are, I mean, used as a business document, which is a PDF based or print based forms, and which also covers some interactive scenarios as well. So in general, the full complete name would be IFbA. So initially when SAP started that, it started with PDF based print forms, so that it would simply replace, or you can say it would compete with the SmartForm and SAP Script technologies as well. Then the next step which was done in Adobe Forms was using the interactive features. So at that moment, when UI5 and Fury was not introduced, so as SAP used BSP and WebDynPro application with as part of their UI technology. So with WebDynPro components, SAP introduced a new UI element called Form element, and then they gave an option to end user to developer to integrate the Adobe Forms, and then they also gave an option to end user to put some input data by themselves by interacting with the PDF forms as well. So at that moment, interactive forms came into pictures. I will go through with this interactive forms details and various scenarios in our next slide, because it is not true like interactive forms can only be used by WebDynPro. They can also be used without a WebDynPro or without any SAP application running on that. So those scenarios I will cover in our next slides. Then the next evolution with Adobe Forms came recently with S/4HANA, where SAP introduced a new Adobe Forms called Forms with Fragments. These kind of forms are specially built to introduce the new output management framework with S/4HANA system, which is only applicable on S/4HANA. Before that, I mean, in normal ERP system, we cannot get access of these kind of Adobe Forms, and those forms are specifically being used by output management only. So even we don't have an option to go and create these kind of forms, or we cannot create any custom form directly by selecting an option like fragment based forms or something like that. So those are delivered with one output management solution by SAP in S/4HANA, and I believe like in future SAP will also enhance that and provide some innovations to give an option to developers to go with an explicit approach where they can also create these kind of forms in other applications as well. But this is what we currently is going on in S/4HANA system. And the next evolution is the Adobe Forms in cloud platform. So these are, I can't say this is a present or recent evolution, but this is still an in process, or you can say innovative things that SAP is doing for their cloud solutions. So there is nowhere they need any ABAP technology or something like that. These kind of forms can also be run and executed by Java applications. Only thing is that when we want to integrate the PDF forms in cloud platform, then we can always go and select those options. So these in our this course we will focus on the first part, like what are PDF based print forms, like how to develop that, because going on or working on the next three topics would always need some complete basic concepts and the guidelines, like was what is being used in Adobe Forms. So for example, if we talk about the Adobe Form using fragments in S4 HANA, so there is no option or nothing called context mapping, where you cannot define any context by yourself, but complete form data is being influenced by SAP delivered OData service, and then we have always need to enhance the different entity sets and provide the custom fields there, and then only we can implement our application logic. And then we have to go to our layout designer, and with use of scripting we can only cover up those custom fields in our form layout. So even the custom layouts are also not possible with these kind of fragments. We can only use the SAP delivered forms, and that's why it's really important, like if we will be confident and we will be sure about how to use the scripting concept and how to consume the custom fields in the layout editor, then only we should be comfortable working with these kind of technologies. So same with the interactive forms, like interactive forms are used in industry where we have still are using some portal, enterprise portal, and there we are integrating the PDF forms where we are asking end users to pull up some input data, but for that we need some additional licenses and additional settings in our SAP system. So I will also go through in our next slide, like what are the requirements for interactive forms, so that at least not with this course, but you would be aware like what are the prerequisites needed for the interactive forms if you want to cover that in your ongoing projects or in your company. So as I said with the evolution, so with that only there are different types and different use of those types of Adobe Forms. So there are two different types of Adobe Forms. One is called PDF based print forms, which is non-interactive Adobe Form, which can be used to manipulate the process application data, and we can prepare the final output or PDF form out of that, and we can send that via mail, fax, or we can print and send it to our end customers. So those are called PDF based print forms. So whenever you, and specifically SAP use this terminology in most of their configuration steps, even with the various configuration in SGFI, MMN, wherever you want to configure some outputs. So you will get an option as a form type with PDF or smart form or something like that. So you will not get any direct option with name Adobe Form. So whenever you see a PDF based form or option as PDF, you mean you can understand that SAP is talking about configuring an Adobe form on that. And then another type is the interactive forms. So interactive forms can also be realized in two different scenarios. So one scenario is called online scenario, which I talked about with using WebIntro application, for example. So the scenario can be understood with one enterprise portal in your company where any end customer can log in on that portal. Then they can get an access to their, for example, travel and expense statements, and then they can also provide some information in their expense statement by themselves in the form itself. And as soon as they save that form, the data entered by the end customer will automatically be updated in the SAP applications, because the customers are already logged in with the SAP application through portal. So whenever any end user is logged in with the SAP network and they are working on the PDF manipulations, or they are getting some interactive features in the PDF, then you can consider that an online scenario. And then another scenario is an offline scenario, where with the name only you can understand, like, end user will never be directly logged into the SAP system or SAP applications. So one offline scenario can be understood like uh, you have created an interactive Adobe form, you attach that into an email and send it to the end customer. Then end customer opens that PDF in their local machine, they fills up the required input data in the form, save that in their local machine, and then they can send it back to the sender of that email. And as soon as that email is get received by the receiver, or you can say the original sender, then we can extract the data in the SAP system, like what SAP end user has filled up, and then we can then manipulate it in our SAP application. So this is one of the offline scenario which I would explain with this slide. So this is the same thing that I said now with the offline scenario. So with the numbers only you can understand steps, like how it is started and how it ended with the SAP. So in the right hand side, in the blue highlighted area, this is our web application server in SAP, where a developer will develop an Adobe form in you can say interactive Adobe form, and you can say that we have created a customer account statement, and then we have sent it to the customer as an PDF attachment. Then in the step number 1, that mail has been sent from the SAP system to the end customer without any intranet. So then end customer, which is in the right hand side, which is in the left hand side in the green part. So you can see like that customer is considered as offline customer. She receives the account statement, she checks that, and in account statement in the bottom it has been asked to fill up the bank details where she would expect the refund from the refund in her account. So she would fill up all the latest bank details and other stuff, save that, and then she could send that email to the sender, or whatever is the information of the email that has been mentioned in that statement. And in the step number 3, the updated account statement is being received by the SAP system, where we have configured that special email address. So we also have some concept of inbound handler in Adobe Forms, as well as in our Xcode transaction, where we can configure some exit handlers to get the data through emails from the outside of the network. So with that only we can always read the PDF attachments, whatever has been being attached in the incoming emails. Then what ADS would do. So ADS is, I will go through like what is ADS, but ADS is Adobe Document Service, which is important aspects of running the Adobe Forms. So this is the backbone of any Adobe form in our system. So ADS will extract the incoming PDF data. It will extract that and get the data into an XML form. And then when we are already in web application server in SAP, here we can simply write an application program to parse an XML data into an ABAP. and then we can get what bank details that end user has provided us, and then we can simply update that into our business partner transaction, so that in SAP we get the information from end user like what latest bank details she would like to provide. So this is a complete end-to-end offline scenario to deal with interactive forms, where user doesn't know about anything about portal or any SAP system. At an end user, she only gets a PDF. She provided the data, and the data is automatically admitted in our SAP system. Even there is another scenario in Adobe Forms, which provides us an option to consume some web services itself. Even in the form layout itself, we can define or connect some web services. And another way is to, as soon as the offline scenario, as soon as something is being saved, then a web service would call, and the same steps can be done and to get the data entered by the user. So that would be another, you can say, implementation way to deal the offline scenario of Adobe Forms. So now we can go through with the software components and the architecture of the Adobe Forms, like what we need. So we talked about, in this scenario, we talked about ADS. So what is that, how it is working, and what all those steps we can see here. So to work with Adobe Forms, we basically need three major software components. So first software component we would need in our system is Adobe Lifecycle Designer. So this is a graphical tool that would be used by the developer to design the forms and to also map the form data, form interface to various UI elements. So all that stuff will be done in Lifecycle Designer. So this is one the important thing that we would need that to create the forms. Then the second software component which is required is ADS. So ADS is Adobe Document Service. This is actually a backbone to use the Adobe Forms. So whenever we starting any project in Adobe Forms, we have to make sure like the ADS is correctly installed and configured in our SAP NetWeaver. So how it is being installed and where it is being installed, I will quickly show you. So in our NetWeaver application, we have two stacks. One is ABAP stack and another is Java stack. So ADS is always being installed in the Java stack of one NetWeaver application. And with ABAP stack, like when we want to create the forms in our SAP system through some transaction code to call the form builder application, there we have to configure some RFC connections where our ABAP stack can always interact with the Java stack, and then it can reach out to the installed ADS. So this is a complete basis responsibility. So whenever you get any project in Adobe Forms or you want to create an Adobe Form, you have to contact with your basis person to make sure like this ADS is correctly installed in the Java stack of your NetWeaver application. So before 740, SAP NetWeaver provides a dual stack setup, but after 740 now SAP is not providing that by default. So in all the industries or in all the companies, like the basis this is the responsibility of basis consultant, where he can install that ADS. He can first set up the Java stack on your NetWeaver application, and then on that he can set up the ADS. SAP also gives a default ADS setup with the NetWeaver only, but it will not work directly because in background there are some authorizations has to be set up to activate those connections. So as soon as those are done, then ADS will be up to be worked upon. And there are also some reports. I will provide that report name and I will also show you in the system like how to test that. So whenever you get any project and you are not aware whether ADS is installed or not, you can simply execute those report and test whether ADS is working fine or not. And then the third important software component, like we need an Adobe reader in our system to get the PDF, see the PDF generated. That is also required in the end user's PC as well. Apart from that, this is an optional software component part where we need an Adobe Reader Rights credentials. So what are reader right credentials? These are prerequisite whenever we would like to work in interactive Adobe Forms. So ADS always by default whenever ADS is up, it always by default create a PDF based print forms only. If you want to have an interactive feature in PDF, so you have to provide an indicator to ADS to know like this particular PDF we would like to edit, or we would like some of the UI elements to be input ready. So for that there should be some credentials or authorization that has to be set up in the system. So this is again a basis consultant job where he has to get the reader right credentials. This can be get from the SAP marketplace. The reader right credentials are identified by a .pfx file. So that .pfx file can be obtained from the service marketplace, SAP marketplace, and then it can be then configured in the system. And as soon as it is configured, then ADS will always identify like it is ready to convert any PDF into an interactive forms if we provide that indicator. So in our later sessions, when we talk about the driver program parameters, then I will also show you some identifiers like which needs to be set when we want to set the interactive forms available. But just one point to be noted, like apart from these reader right credentials, we also need to pay a licensing fee to SAP when we would like to use the interactive form in the productive system. So those licensing fee are a little bit tricky. Like this is not a one-time license fee which you can pay annually and you can use the interactive forms. Those are completely dependent on the usage of the forms. So how many forms you are using in productive environment, based on that SAP charge the licensing fee. So whenever we want to use that interactive feature, we always need to clarify or get the context of all these parameters. But maybe some of you would like to introduce the interactive features in your projects in your company, so you have to explain all these aspects before taking any decision, because it can be a case like if it is not known, then it might be a problem at runtime, because this is only applicable on productive system. What you can do, you can get the reader right credentials from marketplace directly if you have your SAP NetWeaver license with you. With that, these are available and you can install and you can start developing the interactive forms in your development system or also in your test systems. But as soon as it gets live, you have to pay the license. Otherwise, the interactive feature will not work. So this is just one note to be sure. Yeah, so this is all about what are different software components which are used in the Adobe Forms. So now I will quickly go to the runtime environment. Like when we create an Adobe form and when we call the Adobe form, what actually happens in the background. So as I explained in this slide, where we know like we have an ADS installed in our Java stack of our NetWeaver, and this is responsible to generate or handle all the Adobe Forms and PDF generation process. But how it is done, we can just see in this slide. So first of all, in our application program, we get a form data we prepare the data with using our application program in ABAP, and then we pass that form data as an input parameter to the runtime of the form processing. So when we talk about a driver program, or when we call when we call Adobe Form through a application program, so at runtime system would definitely call a form processing runtime environment, and it would pass all the input parameters of the form data to this environment. Then this runtime environment would be responsible to convert this form data into an XML format. So all the Adobe Forms, the data and the layout can be represented as an XML file, and that XML data or XML file is always parsed through SOAP, and then finally it generates the PDF through ADS. So ADS always accepts the data in XML format, which runtime environment of form processing will take care. We don't need to worry about that. So if we are using simple ABAP program, and we can simply pass or prepare the input parameter of the interface, form interface, we can simply pass that, and runtime environment will automatically generate it into an XML format. And then this XML format data is being used by the final PDF object. But as you know, the PDF object or the PDF is not only about the data, it also need a layout or template. So if you don't design any layout, or you don't define any UI element in your PDF, so only data will not be helpful there. So what runtime environment at the same time will do, it will also use that form data in XML format to generate an XML schema. So this is done at the same time, which where XML schema is generated out of that form data. Then this XML schema is being passed to Adobe Lifecycle Designer. So we will see in later slides or later session where what Adobe Lifecycle Designer is getting out of a form. So there is a special data view that is being created. That data view is nothing but it is the XML schema that is generated by the form data, so that at design time we will get an access of the form data, or you can say form interface, where we can simply bind or map those data to the various UI element, so that they can be, the form data can be manipulated or displayed at runtime in the generated form. So Adobe Lifecycle Designer will then get this XML schema, map that with our UI element wherever we, however we design that, and then finally it generates a form template. So Adobe Form Template, or you can say whatever design we are creating in Layout Designers, that is an XDP template. So that is an extension of the form, and then that XDP is also passed to this PDF. So now this PDF object is completed, where it also gets a layout data, and it also gets the form data in XML form. And combining those things, and that PDF object is then passed to the ADS. And at this moment, as soon as it calls the Adobe Document Service, ADS will then parse the XML data and the form template, and then it combine that and generate a final PDF. So as a developer or as a user of the Adobe Forms, what we are doing, we are simply creating some driver program or creating some forms and calling that Adobe Forms, and we get this PDF. But in the background, all these events are being happening. Why it is important to understand? Because when we go into the advanced topic in later stage, then we should also know like at which step what is happening. Because right now I explained about automatic conversion of XML schema. This is happening when we are using a in form interface of ABAP dictionary type, where we are simply providing some input parameter and we are getting the PDF output. But we also have an option to pass the XML schema or XML based Adobe Forms, where we are generating the XML file by ourselves and passing to the Adobe Forms. At that moment, we would simply understand like we don't need to worry about passing or conversion of the form data to XML and passing that again to lifecycle design. So at that, those kind of forms are performance-wise, those are very at least better than the web dictionary based forms where there is no conversion of data to XML happening. Automatic, we are already providing the XML data and system will just pass that and use that in PDF. Of course, this step will still holds true because Adobe Lifecycle Designer will generate the form template, whatever design we are making. But at that, for those kind of forms, this step will not happen. Here, this generation of XML data will not happen. Directly, we will pass XML and we can also pass that XML data to lifecycle design. So all these steps will not be there. So this would be an important aspect to understand like what's happening at runtime.